Roei, welcome. There are a number of things that we're going to talk about which I think are going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, of course. So, at the end of the day, I feel like a hardcore entrepreneur.
Roei Samuel is a British entrepreneur, angel investor, and startup mentor. He founded the Real Sport platform, which reached 9.5 million monthly users. Following this experience, he became an angel investor and launched a platform that connects startups with potential investors.
I got diagnosed with ADHD at 15 when I was on the verge.
That's really rare. School's even
So
picking
rare.
that up. Yeah. Like, how was it growing up as a kid with ADHD and dyslexia, right?
I was a nightmare. As a kid. I was on the verge of being kicked out of school, and I knew I was smart, but I could just never make it work.
You got to take that risk, right? And that risk means being rejected.
I started to see that space, startups, investors, and fractional talent. I don't know how we took that first business to exit. Most people only ever get one shot. This is how the 1% do it, and extend that out to the 99%. Amazing. Job well done. There's nowhere to hide. It's a very small world. I'm just beginning the journey. An investor walks into a bar and the bartender says, "What are you having?" And the investor says, "What's everyone else having?"
Aha, got you. Roei, welcome to the AI McGarry podcast. It's been many weeks and months I've been trying to do this. It is all my fault, I'll say publicly, that something would always happen, or some speech or some president or somebody will ask me to go and do something, which I couldn't say no. Otherwise, it's the offer we cannot refuse type thing sometimes. But I'm super happy to have you on. There are a number of things that we're going to talk about, which I think are going to help a lot of people. And also, you've got a super interesting background. So for those who kind of don't know you, what would be your intro? You mentioned a bit that you used to be a comedian, which is super interesting to know. ADHD, diversity, neurodivergence. Give us a little bit of a spiel, just a minute or two, just so people can get to know you.
Yeah, of course. So, at the end of the day, I feel like a hardcore entrepreneur, right? I've been doing whatever I can to build interesting things and push things forward since a very, very young age. I'm sure you're the same on that side. I got very fortunate with the first proper company that I built, which was a content creation toolkit, helping people create podcasts, videos, giving them tools to optimize content for social. Built that back in 2013, so quite ahead of its time. And we applied it to the worlds of sports and gaming just when Twitch had launched, so massive tailwinds. And if you remember, like 2016, 17, everyone was on esports. And we had just owned that space from a content creation side, which was really, really exciting. So we got very fortunate, scaled that up to about 8 million monthly users. We were acquired by a gaming company. Then I started doing stand-up, did that for 18 months alongside angel investing and working with startups in a fractional capacities, like fractional CMO, fractional CRO, board advisory, that type of work, and then started building Connected late 2019. And I can't believe that's 5 years, 5.5 years ago now.
It's funny because we kind of bumped into each other online. I looked at Connected, and then we connected with your team, and then they put me on, and it's a really cool platform. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. It means a lot coming from someone as yourself. With Connected, I started to see that space, startups, investors, and fractional talent. So I was working in that space 2018 after we sold Real Sport, and I just became obsessed with the idea that the future is fractional. I can see that people want to divide their times in different ways. They want to diversify risk, not just in their investments, but in how they're spending their time. And then enter COVID. And now that the big tailwinds of AI and automation behind us, I really think this fractional, agile way of working is where it's all going. And I'm sure we'll touch on that today.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And with Connected, we wanted to enable the businesses, the investors, and the fractional talent to make the behaviors most closely related to successful outcomes as frictionless as possible. So we've built this software, we've built these tools to enable those businesses, the investors, and the fractional talent to get really successful outcomes. And it's been an exciting journey, launched in the US now, currently servicing about 6,000 customers. So yeah, been a fun ride over the last 4 and a bit years.
Amazing. How many startups have you helped so far? Any cool stats you can give us?
So one of my favorite stories, because we just got an update on it now, I will not mention the name of the company in case they haven't gone public with this information yet, but I'm sure they'll be all right with me promoting it. Yeah. So we had this awesome founder who joined the Connected platform to utilize its tools to get successful outcomes. And his story is he was early 20s in the city, much like yourself, really, really young, hungry, making things happen in that way. And he got diagnosed with MS and realized that his life would not look like what he thought it was going to look like in the future. So he quit his job and decided to travel around the world for a year before the effects of the MS really set in. Yeah. So, and when he was away, he realized there's no way he could do this after that. Yeah. So he became very, very mission driven, very, very purpose driven to create a platform that would allow differently able people to enjoy experiences that they never usually could. And he came onto the Connected platform with this amazing idea, very early traction, but not a lot. And through the platform, he was able to professionalize the business, met some amazing investors and advisors who helped him build his first TV campaigns, invested, I think, like 1.8 million into his company through people he met through Connected on the platform. And they've now just raised 6 million in a big raise and really just going gangbusters, and the amount of people they help. So if Connected could be a conduit, can be a positive influence on that ecosystem, bringing people together, helping them understand what success looks like and get them to those outcomes. Amazing,
man. I think as a founder of businesses now, you've exited a few times. If you had that support in the beginning, that would have been very useful, right?
Well, this is it. Like I don't know how we took that first business to exit. Yeah. I was that green. Yeah. We just got fortunate on the product side of things. Mm-hmm. But understanding true business and understanding like what's negative equity on a balance sheet and why is it not always a great thing to have all of your customers pay up front? Mm-hmm. Just all of these things that are hidden knowledge. And there's only two ways to find them out. Make the mistake yourself. Yeah. And for most people who don't come from a financially literate background, you have to make the mistakes yourself. And most people only ever get one shot. Yeah. So if we can give those guardrails, if we can give the framework to say, watch out for this, do this, this is how the 1% do it, and extend that out to the 99%, amazing. Job well done.
That is a massive help. I think a lot of people that don't start a business because of the fear of the unknown, not understanding how to do financials, how to do a pitch, how to go and get the first investor. So let's go back a little bit, because behind every great person there is a great beginning. And a lot of great people, they have difficult beginnings. And I think, similar to myself, but in different ways, you had an interesting beginning. How was that? Walk us through it a little bit, if you don't mind.
Of course. I think the biggest joy and push in life is the wound we get growing up. It's a bit of a controversial thing to say, because I believe everyone should have a really happy childhood, and that would be amazing. But I certainly see a correlation between painful childhood, chip on shoulder initially, of I'm going to improve, and normally that motivation comes from a place of negativity. Mm-hmm. It's trying to right some wrong. And then I think people who go through that journey then have to have this period of unwinding from negative motivation into motivation from a place of love. Mm-hmm. And it's a fascinating journey to go on and to watch people go on and to help people go on as well. And I'm not going to go into a psychotherapeutic podcast.
I wanted you to talk about that because, the way I see the difference between, let's say Superman and, let's say Batman and the Joker.
Right.
They both came from difficult backgrounds.
Yes.
They both had issues with their families, people dying, people betraying them.
Yeah.
But why did one become a super villain? Why did it become a super
Well, one did stand up, and you have to be a psychopath to do that.
There you go. Yeah. It's just, I like stories like this because it just gives people hope.
Yeah.
If you did come from a difficult beginning, if whoever's listening now, if you do come from if you're in a situation where you're not happy, where things are not easy around you, there is a way out. There is many stories of people who make it out, and that can be turned into a positive. So I'll let you continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I think it's such an important point. And I think one of the things I'm very grateful for, and I think as you grow up and start unwinding from some of those wounds, you get a lot more empathy with your parents. And realize that really everyone's trying to do the best they can from where they are. But my mum grew up in very difficult circumstances. She grew up in, poverty in communist Hungary with literally nothing. I grew up in a tough situation in London, which is nothing compared to a tough situation in communist Hungary in the 50s. It's a different world. Her parents were in concentration camps. I can only imagine, I can only imagine what that does to the upbringing scenario. So I have so much empathy there. And then my dad grew up in a very difficult part of the East End of Glasgow. So again, like in that period of time, they're much older than me. They were in their 40s when they had my brother and myself. And my mum was a primary school teacher. My dad was at different times a bus driver, long distance truck driver, cab driver. And then back in those days, you could still do those things till your mid 30s, late 30s, and still have a career after, which I think is a bit of a unfair advantage the boomers might have had compared to the younger generations. And then he eventually did really well for himself. He was doing door-to-door insurance sales and got into sales and just built his way up. And he got an exit at 68 years old.
Oh wow!
I think it was like 2 million quid, something like that, and it was his life work of like working up to making his own money.
That's brilliant.
And it's amazing. So I saw that and I saw him lose it when I was 7 years old. We lost everything. Yeah. So he lost his whole business. It took him 2 years to start making money again. And my mum was a primary school teacher, and that 2 years was incredibly difficult. Yeah. But to see my dad lose everything when he was 49. And build it back up to an exit, over 21 years.
That's inspirational,
100%. So, it was a fun journey.
So, what was it like? And this is where I want to talk a little bit about neurodiversity. Obviously, my kids and some family members are. So, I see it as a really good thing, but I also see it as a bit of a challenge in the environment we're in today. Schools don't understand it. Even higher education doesn't understand neurodiversity, ADHD, autism, etc. How was it growing up? Were you misunderstood? Did teachers see you as the naughty kid, and that was what they labeled you, and that was it? Like, how was it growing up as a kid with ADHD and dyslexia? Right?
Yeah. I was a nightmare. As a kid. Talk about having empathy for my parents. I was a nightmare, definitely. And I think, especially in the 90s, where there was no education on, well, if we feed the kid a pack of icing sugar, I mean, maybe my parents should have known better. I don't know. Spoke to my mum recently about that. She was like, your favorite treat was the strawberries with the box of the icing sugar. I was like, things start to add up a little bit. I was like, am I ADHD or is that just sugar? So I think at that time where I feel like if you're a 90s kid or an 80s kid, you're really left to your own devices a little bit.
You can go into the woods with your bike and come back after 5 hours and no phones. Not even pagers or anything.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like you're really left to crack on with it. But I was a real distraction in class. I couldn't concentrate on anything. My mind was all over the place. But I got very, very lucky, and I'm really fortunate that the school I went to, even though it was a state school, it was it wasn't a private school, they had a really progressive view on special education needs.
That's good.
And it was interesting at that time. Neurodiversity, ADHD was lumped in with all special education needs, and not the understanding we have today, of course. But they were really forward thinking on that stuff, and they pushed me to get diagnoses. So I got diagnosed with ADHD at 15 when I was on the verge.
That's really rare. Schools even picking that up.
So rare. I was on the verge of being kicked out of school, and I knew I was smart, but I could just never make it work. Like, it's so frustrating. I was on the verge of being kicked out, and they got me. I got an ADHD diagnosis, and that was light bulb moment. As I'm sure, I think you said you found out much later in life, right?
We did, and it was big turnarounds happened afterwards. The thing is, I think. ADHD is misunderstood, right? Like, people just think when you have ADHD, you literally just shake all the time and you pace up and down. But if it's treated in the right way, you have the right medicine or you have the right style of life, it can be a massive superpower as well. You can hyper-focus like nobody. It's like, how have you found it's helped you?
Out of interest, what's your view on the medication for ADHD?
I think that it is necessary to have the medication. You can live the best type of lifestyle, not having a lot of sugar, stimulants, etc. And you can try to control the environment around you so that it's not, noisy and all the other things that can stimulate you. But end of the day, you don't control the world. And sometimes, like when we travel, we fast. But sometimes when we're traveling, can we fast? We see like a nice steak or whatever, we want to eat it, right? So I think it's impossible to fully control your environment. And even if you do all of that, you still don't have full control because it is a different wiring of the brain. So in my view, medication really works. But what about you?
Well, I was, again, go back to, it must have been 2005, something like that, when I was diagnosed and medicated. And I guess at this time, they were handing out medication for fun. So
oh, really?
I was 14 years old. I was 9.5 stone, and they had diagnosed me and prescribed me 120 milligrams of Ritalin a day. I don't know if that's like how that compares to like your if you've used Ritalin or had Ritalin before, but now if I take it, I'll take 20 mgs and I'm like, oof, it feels like
so it's a massive overdose.
I was wired for 3 years. I was like, no wonder my school performance started to pick up. I was basically just wired for 3 years, which was crazy. And when I got to university, I started to unpeel a little bit from the medication. And when you're in a school environment, for me, or I imagine in some types of work as well, that medication would be necessary. But as I started to build more into entrepreneurialism, it made me lose my spark, the medication, and what allowed me to be the best version of myself and who I need to be as a leader. Actually, the medication took it away from me. So what it makes me think, and I know our mutual friend Simon Squibb, he talks about this, which is, well, actually, we frame all of these things across based out of a school system that doesn't work for everyone. So yes, I agree with you on the impulse control. That's where I let myself down. That's the hardest part. The scariest thing for me in a week is when I finish my to-do list. Because then it's just ADHD management. There's nothing
left.
Like,
what the hell am I going to do? And that list never ends though. So there you go. Very rarely does it end. That's a good advice actually, because I think a lot of people, they don't understand that not everybody's supposed to fit in the box, right? The school system is a box. And there's arguments around that. Should it be? Should it not be? Scandinavian schools are different, etc. But then, in certain situations at work, or if you're running certain styles of companies, it's actually better for you to be not in the box, right? You got to think differently. You got to provide leadership on problems that people can't solve. So it can be a great superpower.
Absolutely, as long as you have the hyper reality that I'm really terrible at these things. I need to hire accordingly.
Makes sense.
So for me, it's a COO, for example, or a head of operations who needs to be around me to allow me to do that. Yeah,
makes sense. So let's go now into the founder mode, right? So you're advising companies. You're on boards of companies. You're advising other companies. You've got connected. You've got how many people now? 100?
I think we're now like 96.
96.
So nearly 100,
Which is a lot. I mean, the software company that part own as well is about 100 people. It starts to change dynamics.
Yes.
It's 100 plus. You can't remember everybody's names, and sometimes people get insulted because you have that startup mode where you had 20 people. You knew everybody intimately. Right?
It's easy.
What is a difficult decision you've had to make in recent years that very few people or nobody knows about? And we all have those decisions.
That's really interesting. I think one of the toughest things about being a startup founder is you have to let people go who you really like and respect, and you might connect with them very well on a personal level and want the best for them. But I think this is a challenge every founder has. So I wouldn't say that that's usual to me. I think it all comes down to sacrifice.
Sometimes I'm talking about I've had situations where, so give you time to think about it, because there must be a couple of these. So there's been times, obviously, when you start up a company, you run out of money. And you have to go and borrow, or you have to go and take from your own and put in, and maybe use an overdraft to do that. Or, like these things that happen at the quiet of the night, because you have a family to protect, right? That's the company family. So things like this, like, difficult things that have happened along the way, or sacrifices you've had to make that you haven't told anyone, because why would you?
On that side, thank you for that. That was really useful. When we sold Real Sport, I had payday loans. I actively had payday loans with Quick Quid, Amigos, and Wonga, because I thought, again, we go back to the financial literacy. I thought founder mode me and my co-founder paid ourselves $27K a year each, and we did that for 4 years. And we were staying in the office for long periods of time. We were doing whatever we had to do. And the funny thing about Real Sport was, if you remember pre-2017, now we know everything is a subscription model. And we just take that for granted. Pre-2017, there was still lots of different ways of people thinking about online monetization, and a lot of it was eyeballs. So businesses like Unilad, Social Chain, all of those companies were valued on eyeballs. And that's what we were as well with Real Sport. It was an eyeballs business. It was pre-subscription being the main way of monetization online. So it meant we had an amazing 6-7 million monthly users, but we weren't making any money. You know, we had a really, really engagement, but we hadn't figured out monetization to the extent we needed to yet. So we weren't paying ourselves. So I remember when we sold the company, it was literally a swing of self-made multimillionaire at 26 or payday loans and no money. You know, if the deal and we were facing against Runway as well when we sold the company. So it was literally it was an all or nothing. So yeah, super difficult moments. But again, I just assume that every founder goes through that, right?
Well, there's different extremes, I guess, and a lot of times I think being a founder is a lonely place, because who else could you speak to? Maybe your co-founder, you know, about certain problems. But you guys are in a high intensity environment. You're both stressed. You know, you can't always talk about everything because you don't have the time, and you don't want to maybe emotionally offload on the other person because they have a lot of shit to deal with as well. So it's an interesting place to be in, and you end up doing a lot of things that, you know, nobody ever finds out or knows about, to keep the company alive or to be able to hire a certain person or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, I would say November 2017 was probably the lowest point in my life, which was when we were getting the offer for acquisition from Gfinity. And at that moment in time, it's riddled with anxiety, like bearing on or verging on agoraphobic. I would say couldn't leave my house for 3-4 weeks, and that was not a pretty sight. That 3-4 weeks, I can assure you. So yeah, there's all of that, right? It's part of the fun, though, right?
What's the most outrageous thing you've ever done to be able to hire a person you really wanted to?
I think I've always pushed the limits of Runway. In the biggest way in businesses, because you have to have conviction that you're going to make a hire which you cannot afford because they're going to unlock the next level for you. So I think we're constantly doing that, which is pretty outrageous. I would say I've definitely over-regged certain things, or maybe the level that we've been on, especially Real Sport the first time. You know, you over-egg equity, you don't know the right level of equity to give someone. So I've given away stupid amounts of equity and then had to go back on that the first time with Real Sport with early employees who were never going to work anyway. So yeah, I think those types of usual founder journey stuff. And I think, you know, other than a 6-week internship that I did at an advertising agency between my second and third year of uni, Real Sport was my first job. So I didn't even know office place decorum, let alone, you know,
typical governance structure, that kind of stuff.
Oh mate, onboarding. It wasn't, who knows? So I think you make a lot of those mistakes on that side.
And the other reason why a lot of people don't start businesses is because they need an investor. And when you create a pitch book, obviously you paint a really nice story. You tell them how big the market is and how you're going to get to this amazing percentage of market dominance. What's the most outrageous thing you've done also to get investors? Because sometimes you go knocking on their doors, you follow them to the toilet, you know, you do all kinds of things. I've done all kinds of things to get investors. What's the funniest story in terms of, you know, chasing an investor to kind of really get one in?
I once, again back at Real Sport, I once pretended to be really into tennis.
Oh, really?
And did not end well. Did not. Luckily, didn't have to play it. But they would say, "Oh, Real Sport. Like, what sports do you like?" And I guess I was just super nervous. And I just said tennis in alongside the sports that I'm really into. And had to try and keep up a 10-minute conversation on tennis. Luckily, quite a few investors are very. They want to do the talking. So I think I probably got away with the conversation. Didn't get away with the investor. But that was always one that sticks out to me. And I think perseverance is important. I think you have to be shameless when chasing investors in the way that you would chase business or the best employees. So you can't be afraid to obviously not harass people by any means, but you're going to get ghosted, you're going to get ignored. You have to keep showing up.
That's the thing about being a founder. You got to take that risk, right? And that risk means being rejected.
Yes.
And maybe learn from that rejection. You know, don't just say, "Oh, they hate me," and be a victim of it. they didn't accept my offer because, and then adjust and tweak for next time. Right?
Yeah, and do not take it personally.
Yeah.
As you said, don't take it personally. And I'm sure you've seen this develop as you've become busier and more in demand and everything, is when maybe you're younger and you reach out to someone and they don't accept or reply or whatever, and you do take it a bit personally. Now you sitting here as being like, oh, I missed the first 6. You know, I'm busy, I missed the first 6. Thank you for hitting me up with the 7th. You know, it was nothing to do with you, it was me.
And it's funny, when you start founding companies or doing anything on social media, etc., all the kids that used to ignore you kind of come back, don't they? Hey, remember us? We used to be at school together. Like, yeah, you used to bully me, but cool, no worries. You know, I'm grown up now. Yeah,
and I guess for me, and I would love to know about yourself.
Yeah,
it's always open arms, no hard feelings.
Yeah,
right?
same. Yeah. I'm a bit of a sucker for forgiveness. I do have a rule though. If I'm crossed twice, I go a little bit kamikaze.
Okay.
Not to destroy the person, but I sever every link there is.
Yeah.
So I try once, you know, really hard. Obviously, you know, in marriage, something like that, you got to try 1 billion times.
Yeah.
But I do have a rule because you got to have some self-respect as well, right? And I guess when you do have a good heart, you are forgiving. It can be abused. And I think later on in my life, when around about my 30s, I kind of realized this. And I went, well, you got to have self-respect. The second time, second strike, maybe the third strike, if it's a really important friend, or then that's it. Then it gets severed, never again.
Access denied.
Access denied.
That's
Password
it.
has been changed.
Yeah, that's it. And the universe will keep on throwing the same lesson at you until you learn it.
Yeah.
And I think it's something I've experienced a lot as a founder, normally to do with letting people go. And this is one of my biggest bits of advice to any founder.
Yeah,
there's going to be many difficult times where you have to let someone go, and you have 2 options. And one is to lie to them about why you're letting them go. And you can tell them it's a financial thing or this or that.
Yeah.
It never goes well. Have the tough conversation, even though they're leaving.
Yeah.
Tell them what's really going on, because for whatever reason, I don't know why, but the universe has consistently taught me the lesson that if you lie to them and give them the easy answer, it will come back to bite you.
Do you find that it's more of an English thing? We want to be polite. We want to say it's something else. It's not you. It's us. You know, that kind of approach. Whereas in US, it's a bit more, man, you did not perform like we agreed. You got to go.
Yeah. I assume it's a cultural thing, or maybe it's just we're people pleasers.
Yeah.
Maybe we're people pleasers. I don't know. And again, that's the hard lesson. You can placate everyone, but when it goes wrong, the finger's only going one place, and it's to you.
One thing that we all do, and people listening to podcasts like this, you know, they're looking for advice. But I'm not going to ask you what's the best advice you have to give. What's the worst advice you've ever taken on board, and what impact, what kind of damage did it do?
I think the worst advice I ever took on board was hiring people that were suggested to me because of the logos on their CV.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one where every single time has just been brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Never works out well. And then I can tell you about particularly bad advice I took, which was one of our advisors was in the first business in real sport, was a very, very successful entrepreneur, unicorn founder. And we had asked his CTO, we'd asked him if he was happy to lend us his CTO to do a tech test at that time, because we didn't have the same. Gorilla Task wasn't a thing, for example, back in 2014 or whatever. Can you just get your CTO to really check the engineering skills of this guy? And he was like, yeah, golden. So amazing. We were like, thank God, like finally found our lead engineer, first time ever hiring for that role. So excited. The guy was horrendous. The worst engineer I've ever worked with. And funnily enough, so we fired him after a few months. But even though we were fighting against it for so long, because we were just, well, listen, if this guy said, this guy, can I swear on it?
Oh, of course.
Oh, okay. He's like, this guy's the shit. We're like, we can't just lose him. This guy's built a unicorn. And then we fired him, which is a whole thing. 4 months later, we order an Uber. The guy's driving it. You know, he was, let alone being like amazing engineer. The guy was like, clearly the tech test never happened. He just gave us the rubber stamp. It's like, that's bad advice.
Oh, wow.
That was bad advice.
Did you take that Uber ride all the way, or you just got out?
We did not. We saw the name.
Yeah.
And we were like, it can't be. It can't be that
It can't
driver.
be.
We saw the day, opened the door, couldn't believe it. He drove off, cancelled ride. So yeah, that was bad advice.
Man. It is a small world.
Yes.
It is a small world. That's something that I'm realizing as I get older. Do you realize the same, or you just kind of, it changes how you treat people as well when you realize this?
Yeah, well, I think there's nowhere to hide anymore. You know, with LinkedIn, like with all the social media platforms, like it's all out there. You know, it's a very small world. It's a world full of exposure and you know, being seen. Like it's all there.
Yeah. Listen, so you've had a couple of exits. You're running a really cool company now. Have you ever had a moment where you've kind of thought, "That's it, I've made it. I've fulfilled my life's ambition"? Or are you far away from that? And what's left for you to do?
So far away. I feel genuinely at 33 years old, like I'm just beginning the journey. I felt every day I'm like, oh, I was an idiot last year. Like I knew nothing. So I feel so passionate that I don't think we are of an age where retirement at 60 is ever going to be a thing. There's a book called The 100-Year Life. And it's playing out in front of us right now. Medical science, AI, like we're all going to, for better or worse, we're all living to at least 100, you know? So I think unless you've got that growth mindset where it's like, well, I am in this game for another 50 years, you know, so we're just getting started. But how you must see that as being an AI expert, like where this is heading, like longevity and being in it and being on the edge of innovation, like is the only way to think about where we are right now.
Yeah, it's tough because right now the innovation's at a point where it's not going to completely displace things. It's just augmenting and helping. So it's really advantageous if you're a small company trying to compete with bigger competitors. If you want to create new products and services, it's much cheaper and faster to do it now. But you know, the bit that scares me is the point where that flips a little bit, right? It comes to a point where AI can do everything we can. And then, you know, we're going to have a massive identity crisis. Because then we're at the top of the food chain, and there's this thing that can do anything that we can do once, you know, humanoids are more advanced, etc. But then there's going to be a massive period of adjustment, I would say. But then after that period of adjustment, however long that is, it might be a complete disaster. It might cause world wars. Or it might be a 10-year period. But there is going to be a period of adjustment where we get to the other side of that, hopefully, and that's not guaranteed. That then we can start focusing on other things. So we can cure diseases, we can explore other planets, we can do things that we've never had the chance to do because we've been so busy to be in this, you know, containerized cubicle doing spreadsheets while the other guy does something else. And, you know, it's Henry Ford all over again, but just in cubicles. So once we get rid of that, I think, you know, the future will look very, very interesting. And there's a lot that we can accomplish with that slope, but we have to survive it first.
Well, I think that the integration, the adoption period is very, very interesting because if you look back at so many big technological jumps, you have that period of integration, whether it's smartphone, TV, the internet, where it's like, okay, what is this? We've got 5 years, like, what is this? Like, let's really figure it out. Like, seems great, but might not be. Like, let's really understand. With the rate of innovation just accelerating the way that it is, do we even get periods of adoption anymore? Because by the time you think you understand where it is, it's already so far beyond that. Like, and that's only accelerating. Like, do we even have that adoption period?
I feel really bad because when I was doing speeches, you know, even last year, I was talking about Gen AI. Okay, Gen AI, LLM models. Okay, that could be very interesting for X, Y, and Z. But then now I have to talk about AGI. And people haven't even got their heads around or haven't even adapted to LLMs yet. You know, just the basic Gen AIs. And a super narrow AI, what do you do there? And so I'm conscious sometimes of, I've been in rooms where, you know, in a speech or a meeting, people have flown from different countries, from far away, to be able to hear what I've had to say. But then I could feel the energy in the room just like, woo, just drops. Because I've said some really scary shit. But it's because I'm seeing stuff which is going to come out 6 months from now, 12 months from now. And I feel this obligation to kind of at least warn people a little bit.
Yeah, start seeding it out there.
Seeding it out, yeah. Because I feel it's unfair that if I know some of this stuff, I can never say what these things are because there's, you know, quadrillion NDAs.
Yeah.
But at least I can give indications of what's going to come. And so I'm in a really privileged position at the moment around this. A lot of the big tech companies come to me, Danilo, can you guys have a look at this? What do you think about this? I'm a little bit of a Switzerland of AI situation. I'm trustworthy. everybody come. I have the skills. I have the people to analyze products and services, and then things take time to come to market. So it's interesting at the moment. Let's talk a little bit about AI and investing.
Before,
yeah.
because I think that the really interesting challenge for me is like when you have concepts like quantum computing, mechanics, and physics, which are already difficult to express in language.
Very, yeah.
Right, already difficult to communicate concepts.
Yeah.
To most people, even if you're fascinated by it. It's like try to explain quantum mechanics to someone who's not really read much about it.
Really hard, yeah.
So now when you have AI which doesn't need to express it in language and can just express these things numerically, how long until we're just so far outpaced by that quantum field that we're all just operating in the dark, right?
So last year, the IQ of some of the best AIs, which were publicly available, keyword publicly available, it was like 150. So it's pretty clever. I mean, Einstein was like 160 something. Elon is like 150 something. So it's pretty clever. Of course, it's crap at certain things. It loops. It makes mistakes. But that's more server issues. And the funny thing is, a lot of people are concentrating on hallucinations. So AI is no good because it hallucinates. Hello, humans make shit up all the time, or they exaggerate, or they fill in blanks. And hallucination is actually, what a lot of people don't know, is by design. You need to hallucinate in order to have a better imagination to solve complex problems. If you don't have an imagination, it's very difficult to solve problems. So by design, AI is allowed to hallucinate because we're asking questions for things that we are trying to solve. It's a much bigger, complex topic, but it's there on purpose. It's not there because the AI is broken.
It's fascinating. We're engineering consciousness before we understand it.
Yeah, and next year, we're already 2025. Very reasonable to expect the IQ to reach 300 plus. And the multimodal piece is really important. And agency this year is going to be enormous. Mm-hmm. And in the startup scene, there's a lot of SaaS companies, right? So just when
there
were exactly. I'm getting to that point now. So when OpenAI, when Claude were announcing, Anthropic, all those guys were announcing different capabilities, like Duolingo lost 30% of its value share the day that they announced that they could just do simultaneous translations. So, SaaS companies are going out of business a lot. I see a lot of private equity groups under a lot of trouble. Some of them know it, some of them don't. So these are companies that own portfolios of companies, right? It's like 30, 50 companies, big chunks of them. And they own companies which are very traditional, or they own SaaS companies which rely heavily on AI innovation. So just to answer your question, where is it going? This year, definitely 300 plus, and we have agency. So I see companies like UiPath, like Microsoft. Microsoft is on the right end of the fence. A lot of companies which build automations, they're in big trouble because as soon as you have an AI agent that can do things, understand the screen really, really well, you don't have to hard code anything. Yeah, it's going to navigate all kinds of complex tasks that we couldn't do before.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, and if a company is adopting agencies versus one that isn't, they're going to get absolutely killed, like smashed.
So we've already seen it with Connected, where we were working with an AI partner, because we're not an AI company. We don't pretend to be one. Yeah. We utilize it.
Of course, yeah.
We were working with the company to co-create a couple of projects to help us automate some of our processes. And we've been working with them for like 5-6 months, been good. And with the latest OpenAI update with the agents, that project and that company has just gone.
Yeah.
And it's that.
Exactly.
But the amazing thing for us is now where we'll win is just staying with our pulse on what's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
We don't need to create anything.
Yeah.
On that side, like all of the difficult processes that companies spend years trying to improve to win EBITDA, almost don't spend the cognitive load there. Just stay innovative and make sure you're adopting it as it's coming down the pipe. But like focus on what you do well. Do not focus. Like it's an amazing time to be building.
We should sit down later and talk about it more. But it depends what kind of business you are. So let's say you're a bit of a traditional business. You do accounting. You're a law firm. You have a lot of paperwork, a lot of emails, a lot of these repetitive monthly tasks, quarter-end tasks. Like banks have a lot of this. I think there's an enormous benefit in having agency, or just even AI and automation, to be honest, even if it's the older style. because then, you're allowing people, you're hiring people who are highly educated and usually quite well paid to be doing like copy and paste tasks. It's insulting, actually. So I believe that we should get rid of that. Like we cannot evolve as a race if we are going into work to copy and paste stuff and to run reconciliations, and that should be banned. That should be a law to ban that shit, right?
Danilo's law. I like it.
Yeah, if I ever came into power, that'd be my first thing. No copy and pasting, no repetitive tasks. So it depends what kind of business you're in, and we'll have a look later at Connected. But there's definitely stuff you could augment so that people can focus more on the EBITDA things, creativity, spending time with clients, etc. is really, really important. So one big theme that we're seeing in businesses and AI is, as soon as you mention the word AI, valuations go up. Investors get excited. Do you, from your perspective, from your experience, do you feel investors actually understand AI? And when a company starts mentioning AI all over the place, do they actually know how to, detect if it's real AI or not AI, or are companies being overvalued? Let's talk a little bit around this topic. That's a massive topic right now.
An investor walks into a bar. And
this is the comedian side. I was waiting for a joke. Okay, we're going to get a joke. Okay.
An investor walks into a bar and the bartender says, "What are you having?" And the investor says, "What's everyone else having?"
Aha, got you. Yeah.
Right? I mean, do they understand? I don't necessarily think it's the job of early stage VCs to fully understand domain expertise to that level, unless they're like an incredibly thematic fund. But you're never going to see a generalist fund. I mean, you probably now will have to, because AI is here to stay and it's not Web3.
Yeah.
For an early stage VC, you have to understand people, I believe.
Gotcha.
Like arguing over valuations based on like the credibility of a tech stack at the very early stage almost is like counterintuitive, because the return profiles you're going for is you're just betting on people. I don't think most investors overnight became it's impossible, right? Some of them will be, but I think like most of them we're trying to figure out. And again, anyone who's claiming to be an expert on AI as a field, fair enough. But anyone who's claiming to be right at the cusp of them, unless you're in the valley and so keen in the valley, like of course you don't know where the current state of the most innovative emerging technologies are. Yeah. Like I don't believe it. Like, you'll know better than I do. What's your take?
I think when it comes to something like AI, where you have to really have an amazing imagination, you have to understand how companies run on a day-to-day basis, like operationally. I think it makes a difference. So let's say, obviously, you have to, as an investor, you have to invest in the team, right? Like the people running that company, you have to be able to give them your family and trust them, right? Like they have to be solid. They have to be maniacal about their mission. But when it comes to AI, I think you could have average people running a company, but if they are really good at implementing AI, they can beat a fanatical team who doesn't have AI. And you see a lot of stories in the news around, AI is just a fad, it's a hype, it doesn't really touch your bottom line, we can't track the benefits. That's because that company is not implementing AI in the right way. Like I've seen AI implementations that have created 50, 60% improvements on processing times, on costs of departments and whole businesses. If you have a team of people that actually know what they're doing with AI, they will destroy anybody else who's not using AI because they just understand how to implement it. So I think nowadays investing is a little different, in my personal view at least. If you're going to invest into a company and they have, an interesting group of people running it, the founders are, they look pretty interesting, they're very dedicated, but they have real examples of how they're using AI, and it's real AI, it's not just, marketing lipstick on a pig. I think that's super interesting. And I think today, as an investor, you have to be very good at picking that up. Of course, it might not be the latest AI. It might be AI that maybe they've invented that, is not mainstream yet. But you have to, as an investor today, you have to understand AI, because if you don't, you will make an investment and later on try to backtrack, try to modernize that company. It might be too late. Someone has already overtaken you. So I don't know if that makes sense. Is that?
Yeah.
It's different nowadays, I think.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And I think you're right. Those who are not incredibly AI curious are uninvestable.
Yeah.
I think that's what it will boil down to. Like, unless you are so fascinated by where that technology is heading, you probably will get left behind. So that's probably a good way to think about it.
Yeah. And I'm trying to, a lot of private equity groups, investors, they come to me, I'm looking at this company, what do you think? And then, I pick up things like, oh, I didn't see that. So I think it is worth learning a little bit more if you're an investor. Just learn about AI because it can it's a game changer. It is. If you know what you're doing, you will smash anybody else.
And probably especially at that PE stage where the units of operation of the business will be big enough and mature enough that implementing AI-driven processes can explode margins overnight. You have to. I'd say it's even more important at that stage.
I'll give you a recent example. So recently I bought a solar energy company.
Nice.
And, installing solar energy panels in the UK, certain types of boilers and battery packs for homes, that kind of stuff. So renewable energy. And there's about 900 companies like that in the UK today, big and small. But the thing that we are doing, which we're launching now in March, is all of the sales department is completely AI driven. So hyper-realistic AI phone callers to cold call, to check, statuses. Is anybody interested in, getting renewable energy, solar panels, etc. All of the email marketing, lead generation side of it, all of the answering for social media, generating leads there and interest there. So all of the sales activities are going to be driven by AI. Mm-hmm. So what's the difference there? If we have a competitor, they can make maybe 50, 100 phone calls a day per person. If they're really good, mm-hmm. those phone calls are going to be inconsistent. Some days they're tired. Some other days their girlfriend had a fight with them or whatever. One day they may be too enthusiastic. They scare customers. Humans are tough in doing these repetitive tasks, right? That AI system, this lead generation machine that we're putting together, 10,000 calls a day.
Crazy.
Is going to absolutely smash the competition. And I'll make a prediction now. If that goes well, because it is a bit innovative the way we're putting this together, we will have competitors being subcontracted by us to do the jobs that we are sourcing for them as well, because we wouldn't have enough engineers. That's the idea of the company. So we'll see. By April, we'll know if that's going to be the case, but that's the plan.
It's AI-powered companies are a different species.
Yeah.
To non-AI powered companies, and when you break it down so well like that, it's just night and day.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated to see the disparity that's going to be driven between those who are AI savvy and those who aren't. And I think that's one of the big challenges as well. And as business owners, people who should already be fanatically obsessed with what they're doing, there's that disparity. What about people who are just going around about their lives who are not necessarily all in on AI in this way? Like, extrapolate that over 10 years. What happens? Where do they go? Please tell me.
Yeah. I know that's what you're doing, by the way. You're asking me the question. This is my
podcast.
I'm
trying to get the knowledge. I'm trying to get the knowledge.
I think there's a period of time where all of this stuff can be very innovative. But for instance, this lead generation machine I'm building one day will be a commodity that anybody can go and buy ready-made with some tweaks. But that's probably a couple of years out. So I would say this is the gold rush moment of AI. It probably started last year, where you have a chance to create things which haven't been commoditized yet. And then later on, that can become a business in itself. So later on, the idea is to sell this lead generation machine to other companies once we've exhausted it as much as we can and tweaked it. And that will be an AI company on its own. So for the people who are not using it, to be honest, this is happening so fast. And companies are going to be going bust and booming, depending which ones adopt it. They will not feel it so much. Later on, when it becomes a commodity and everybody gets access to these kind of cool things like I'm talking about, I think then people will start to feel the pinch.
Yeah.
Their jobs will start going away. If you're in sales 5 years from now, it's not good. If you're a lawyer, a junior lawyer, even now, this year, really not good. If you're typing up NDAs and simple wills and stuff like that, it's finished. AI is definitely taking over. So it depends where you're at. But I think right now is an interesting moment to build stuff with AI and commoditize it later.
I think it's going to be fascinating once you start having AI buyers, because we're all talking about AI sellers, but what happens when you start getting AI sellers and AI buyers against each other?
Yeah.
And then you just have this level of transaction happening, which is so far out of human.
Yeah.
That's going to be a really, really interesting one. And I think obviously it will be a long time till you see that in the B2C environment. But not a million miles away at all.
Yeah.
And then who's doing the buy?
Man, AI is even infiltrating into relationships now. I wrote an article I'm a tech columnist for Wired magazine. I wrote a column around how people are treating their AIs like their partners. Like it's scary, the percentage of people who are talking to their AIs like in a more romantic way.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very interesting.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of AI girlfriend boyfriend companies booming, popping up everywhere. And to be honest, it at first when you hear it, it's a bit shocking, but it makes sense. If you're not in a relationship, or if you're lonely, you went through a COVID period where you can't get out of the house still, you're still kind of a little bit paranoid. Having someone to talk to who remembers everything you've ever said, remembers your birthday, will never forget it. All of these little details that even a really good friend might not be able to do, the AI can. So there were certain things about having a relationship with an AI which is interesting, and I can after doing all the research for it, especially in Japan, they're actually using AI to get people into relationships. They're using it in other ways which are innovative. But I think AI has infiltrated more aspects of our lives than we can imagine. And day to day, you don't realize it.
Yeah, totally. And going back to what we were saying before, the adoption period when these new technologies come in, we still haven't seen the impact of the first algorithm generation. Those who are parented via iPad. We don't know exactly what that looks like when they're 18, let alone now the first cohort which will be parented by AI. We don't know the impact, but all of these behaviors that we're like, oh, that's interesting, they'll be taken for granted, they'll be normal. And I wonder when we have the crisis of consciousness which says I'm no longer able to delineate between what is synthetic and what is authentic because they look the same, and it will be the AR goggles on, goggles off. Oh, it's the same. It's the same. And that crisis of consciousness, I think if you have come to a peace with the concept that everything may or may not be real and it doesn't really matter, then it's okay. But for a lot of people, it has to be real. And when those questions seep in of is it or isn't it, it's a crisis of consciousness. And I think, we need to be a little bit semi-prepared for that.
Do you know what I think will happen? I think in the beginning, there'll be a lot of discussion, but it's not real. So that you shouldn't consider it. It's not real. It's a bit like Dubai. People say Dubai is a fake city. But amazing, Dubai is only booming. People keep moving there, right? I think in the end, what's going to happen is it's not about if it's real or not. It's about how it makes you feel. Because end of the day, we create experiences. Why do we do that? Because of the way we feel, the memories that we then later take with us. And a lot of people say this, the most important thing in life is not what you acquire, not blah, 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 blah. It's the memories you accumulate. Memories are a collection of feelings of what happened in that moment in time. So if an augmented reality, an AI situation, which is not real, but made you feel loved, it made you feel appreciated, remembered, and that's, at first you might go, but it's not real. But subconsciously, you still felt that way. So there's some psychology there as well. You mentioned different generations. I am so fascinated by this topic. I remember once being in a team, and I was just, obviously you can't talk about people's age, right? Because HR will kill you. But you go around and you have a look and you kind of guess, right? It's so common nowadays to be in a team where there's 5 different generations working in the same team. How does that impact the way a company is run? Do you see that as a good thing? When companies give their quarterly updates and the CEO talks to their workforce, they deliver one message, right? But does that message resonate with every generation that works in that company? Talk a little bit more about this generational bias dynamics that happens. Like, how do you see companies need to think about this differently?
Yeah, I don't think it will resonate, because if you look at the dissonance in feeling between the boomer generation and the millennials, let's say, and that's what a 30-year gap, 40-year gap, I feel like if sentiment and feeling and experience is so driven by technology in the modern time, then that generational gap narrows. And I see that. We all have an intern who's 18 and I'm 33, and that 15 years probably feels exactly like 40 years from me to my dad. Yeah. And it's only going to get smaller and smaller. So I think you have to build chains of command that bridge that diversity. And that goes across all types of diversity as well, right? If you want to resonate with your entire audience, you have to have representation across all tiers. And I'm not like crazy diversity guy, but I'm talking about being able to resonate with your audience. Yeah, it's I think that's that's where AI will take us, is that here's the one message, make it work for everyone, right? With the realization that it needs to be tweaked to resonate. So I'll just stick it into ChatGPT will be my answer, right?
Funny you say that, Roy, because I'm building an AI company to do just that.
There you go.
So
like internal comms.
So it's if there's a company update, it gets written in 5 different ways, and then it will evolve into actually every single person will get their own personalized message about the company update. Yeah. About things that they care about, things they resonate with. The tricky bit is in the branding of the company, right? So let's say you are Victoria's Secrets. And obviously 5, 6 generations, maybe 6, is there 6? Old grannies still buy underwear. You want to resonate the message with all of them. How do you do that? Do you have to have 6 different posts? Do you have 6 different adverts? So that gets interesting because that kind of makes the brand look a bit confusing. So that's the area that I haven't tackled yet.
Although surely as things move to smart glass throughout, you'll never have an environment where all see one. Right, surely the level of hyper targeting based on geolocation, based on exactly who you are, actually brands probably don't need to face that challenge.
This is one big advantage with AI. I think the generating content is getting cheaper, especially now with DeepSeek. And then generating videos like Volvo, McDonald's, so many companies making AI generated commercials, which cost them maybe 10, 20 grand versus 100 grand, which would have cost. I think you're right. I think in the future, whatever that is, 2, 3, not more than 5 years, I think, we'll get to a point where people are getting personalized content. It's really just made for them. Yeah. Or it's made for their group at first, and then maybe for them individually as well. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think when I see founding teams now, really, really smart founding teams now, I almost see that in the same way that they won't be held back by different brand messaging, they're also not going to be held back to one product. I think it's going to be awesome teams building lots of things at once because the barrier to getting into market, which existed, and therefore you had to hyper focus on one thing. It's all going to be about teams being able to collaborate to launch. Yeah. So I think that all the table stakes, wipe them off, pull out a thing, it's done.
Man, one thing that keeps me up at night, which is weird, is we have 3D printers. We have some healthcare providers printing organs, printing skin cells and things like this. And Adidas printing shoes. Do you ever think you'll come to a point where you will get printers which get more advanced, obviously, and anything that you want that you can just imagine with AI, generate this shoe for me, modify it like this, like that. I like that. Print it. Do you think we're going to get to a point where kind of the world system collapses? Because you can just make anything you want at home. You don't need a company anymore. It starts to get pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, I don't think there is a world system, right? I think the thing that we're all holding up is the myth. This idea that there's ever been order, for me, is actually BS. It's all just chaos. And the thing that we're all trying to uphold is the story that it's not. So we're going to have to reinvent the story. And I think that's the thing. The chaos is already there, but the story is going to need a big update. Luckily, we'll be able to hyper-personalize it to everyone individually and service it to them based on the story that they want to hear. But yeah, I mean, it almost like it has to, right? I had a very long conversation with ChatGPT a couple of weeks ago. Very long conversation where I was talking about...
Not romantic, I hope.
Not romantic. Well, there's a couple tangents in there. But I was trying to get it to burrow down to a percentage of the likelihood of humanity being able to stay ahead of a catastrophic event driven by AI, whatever that might be. Like, what is the likelihood through guardrailing, through ethical building? And it was a long conversation because it didn't want to give me a percentage, as you can imagine, but I got it to 52%. So there's 52% likelihood that we will be able to stay ahead. Now, I don't know if that was hallucinatory. I don't know if that was actually 5.2, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, that topic, because the fail-safes inside the systems which are available to the market, we ask it not to talk about these things because it generates fear, and it's already pretty bad already, the fear. Let's get into a little bit around, the issue around being a founder, or even employees nowadays are working crazy hours. What's your views on work-life balance? Does it even exist? Like, I heard Jeff Bezos say something really interesting the other day. He talks about work-life harmony. And certain stages of your life, you're going to have more harmony with this, more harmony with that. So what's your thoughts around work-life balance? You've worked crazy hours, I'm sure.
Yeah. And look, I'm fortunate because I love it. I absolutely love it. Like, I've never felt sorry for myself about an hour that I've had to do. Like, if you find the thing you're passionate about, all the good stuff. I think life is all about windows of opportunity. And I see that with really committed teams, senior teams, those bought in, those with equity, they see it in the same way, which is it's going to be output built around where I can do things. My CRO, awesome guy, amazing, been with me since very, very early on. Young family, 2 young kids. And it's like, I know that he's driving them to school. And I know I'm not, it's all just windows of opportunity of when's the right time to do different things. And I think that's great. And you've got to make it work for yourself. I don't think as a founder you'd ever expect anyone to make the sacrifices that you do. And I think it'd be crazy.
Let's talk about this a little bit, because this is a mistake I see a lot of founders making. It's, people not as committed as me. Why isn't he working over the weekends? Let's talk a little bit about this. Like, should a founder be picking someone as passionate as them? How do they deal with people who obviously want to have a bit more balance in their life or harmony? A lot of founders are maniacal about just finding people just like them. Is that a good thing? And when they don't, how should they deal with it?
If you can find people who are committed as you are to a vision, amazing. Like, that's incredible, and you should cherish those people and be loyal to them and take them with you on the journey. But you can never expect to have that. You can never expect to have people who are committed as you are. And you have to incentivize them in the right way for that to even be on the table, I think. And people will naturally also go with that. People are very, very ambitious, and you should seek them out and elevate them and bring them to the top. But no, I think it'd be insane to expect anyone to do what you do. I imagine that there will be certain environments where the numbers are big enough that people almost like build that expectation of themselves, and probably less so now as time got on. But we did speak about 90-hour weeks in banking and those things were. Do you think those things are rarer now or more common?
It's a tough one. I think it's happening as a culture in a lot of banks or a lot of companies, let's say, in general. Whereas you don't leave until your boss has left, and that kind of thing goes on. A lot of FaceTime. I think it's more acceptable nowadays to have a normal 40, 50-hour week, but it is frowned upon. I still believe that. The problem is a lot of the people working today, millennials, let's say, who are managerial positions, they were educated by baby boomers, and baby boomers were really defined by what they do for work. As a baby boomer, you have to be useful as a person because they came just out of the war period. Like, everybody had a role to play to let the country move forward, a different mentality. And I think the millennials saw their parents as boomers growing up in that way, like working crazy hours and being defined by their work. And some of that has trickled down psychologically into millennials. That's why they when you meet someone at a party or socially and you ask them, hey, how are you? Tell me a bit about yourself. If they go straight into, I do this for work, and they don't talk about themselves, actually, having whatever, a hobby, a family, and they mention the work bit later, you can see very quickly psychologically what kind of impact they've had from their parents, or maybe the work, the company they work for, etc. So it's a great way of analyzing people. I always ask, tell me a bit about yourself, and then they go straight into work, usually.
Yes, I think I would say that's I've never even thought about it from that way, that people don't have such identity. And maybe it's just the circles that I'm in, but people are they over-identify with what they do.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right?
And that's very dangerous, right? Because in the world that we live in today, you're going to end up doing different things over your career, way more than it was 50 years ago. 50 years, you could be in a company for 30 years, and it's respected. I think nowadays, when you're at a company for 10 plus years, people are kind of like, why are you not moving? Yeah, what's going on there?
Yeah, and I see it's where a lot of people get themselves in a big psychological mess when they over-identify with their work, especially founders. Yeah. You know, because if you over-identify with your business and it dies, you die.
Yes.
You know, you get the identity death. And I see it a lot. And I think one of the big differences, though, intergenerationally speaking, is availability for urgency. I used to have to be in the office. If someone needed to get hold of me, I got to be there. Now it's like, if I need to get hold of anyone, I can get hold of them. Yeah. And therefore that blend is a bit easier.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not going to be 12 hours. If there's something super urgent, it's going to be 12 minutes.
Yeah, true. One thing that's been bugging me the last couple of years, and I don't think I can solve it, it's way bigger than my circle of influence, which is a small one, is, you know, at work, you have a lot of things which are unfair. So let's say, you know, the work rules around giving women or people time off for children. You know, a woman is expected to have a child a couple of weeks before, you know, work all the way up to a couple of weeks before having one, has a child. 6 months later, when the baby's only 6 months old, having to return to work. In UK, of course, in Finland, other places it's longer. And then, you know, not having the right adjustments with people who are neurodivergent, giving them, you know, the choice to work in certain ways, wear headphones or whatever it may be, and not, you know, be reprimanded for that. Do you ever think we're going to reach a point where companies really, really take all of this into account to make work, you know, as comfortable as possible, as adjustable as possible? Or do you think this is just a utopian dream?
I think it probably is a utopian dream, because if you look at the rollback of DEI, for example, in the US, I think there was always a lot of virtue signaling. There was always a lot of people who weren't really committed to it. They just do it because it's the right thing to do for business at the end of the day. And I think as things get more difficult, more competitive, and it's all about execution, these things get unwound further and further. So I would say, you know, the pendulum swings with most things in life. The pendulum is firmly swinging away from accommodation to actually, as an employer, the level of optionality you're going to have. Because if it's like, deal with this human or automate the process, like, and it's a crazy flip. Like if you look back at like 2021, where employees had so much optionality. Employees, like especially engineers, they were like, well, I will work wherever the hell I want to work. And maybe engineers is a bad example because AI engineering is so in demand. But the whole market, it was a employees market. Yeah. It's just flipping in the biggest way to an employer's one. So I think it's going to get harsher. And I also think that's where, and I'm not commenting normatively whether these are good or bad things, but that's where the US will dominate with AI versus Europe, where workers' rights have been developed over centuries in Europe in a way that they haven't in America. Yeah. So that unwinding even further of employee rights is going to happen quicker in the US, which will lend itself to further advancement within AI. Again, not saying it's a good or a bad thing, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think when you look at a company and they smell money, you can tell a lot about their culture by how they react, right? So a lot of companies are saying, oh, AI is not going to displace jobs. Look, I'm really sorry to say this, but AI is going to displace jobs, and some jobs are never coming back. Yes, eventually companies will make enough money to create new products and services that will generate new types of jobs, or more jobs will become, you know, in huge demand. But there are some jobs which are never coming back. Taxi drivers at some point will never be needed again. Maybe in some very difficult rural areas where it's just, you know, hasn't been mapped yet or AI hasn't been trained on. You know, truck drivers, dishwashers, cleaners, teleconference, you know, salespeople, telesalespeople. The list can go on. I can probably give about 100, right? Those jobs are never coming back. So I think people need to realize, a lot of people are saying things which are softy just to kind of sound nice and not to kind of be doom and gloom. I'm not a doom and gloom guy. I think there is a great future ahead of us. But people also need to look at the jobs that they're going into. A lot of people ask me, what do I tell my son to go and study at university? And that always catches me, because then I go, go for something creative, go for something to do with critical thinking. But really, if we think about that, it's quite basic, right? Like you can't create a career out of being a critical thinker, usually. You can't create a career out of being super creative. It's what you do with that creativity and creating products and services and businesses that gives you a future, right? So it's getting harder and harder to know what to say to people. What's your views on what people should be focusing on?
Well, I'm definitely not doom and gloom guy either. A question I have is, as the size of the job market decreases, but the rate of new products increase, there's going to be this interesting gap between supply and demand. Like, who's buying the products? Because if everyone's out of a job, like there's a fundamental breakdown in the way of basic economics there. So that's going to be a whole interesting one. I would say it's all about your ability to apply. There's no more premium on knowledge, right? There's no more premium on information. Where do I tell people to? I don't have kids, so I've been fortunate to not have to think about that too much and not like peek behind the curtain. I would say build a personal brand. I would say build a personal brand. I would say you have to find a way to differentiate. You have to do something alongside your 9 to 5 that makes you stand out. So if you're in a corporate career, I'm also working with startups on the side. Whatever it is that you're doing, you've got to do 10 degrees to the left or right, 20, 30 degrees left or right as well, so that when an employer is looking at you, they'll be like, he's not, they're also doing that. I would say that you have to differentiate. So I wouldn't say doom or gloom, don't bother learning anything, something new, but you've got to diversify what you do to give you an edge.
A good example of this is this solar company I was telling you about, Certified Renewables. We started to film the commercials for it, for socials, right? Obviously not on TV because we're in the freaking 80s, but we had to take 79 takes. There's two main front face directors who are going to be on social media, etc. And I said to them, guys, we've got to make some stuff for social media. We've got to tell people about this great company. And 79 takes. And we looked at it, we're like, God, we sound like everybody else. Every solar company, save the planet, make your house more valuable, boring. What we took all of the outtakes of the 79 takes, all of the mess ups.
Nice.
And we made a really funny video out of it. And that's what we're going to use for marketing. So diversification, right? You gotta find ways to show off that creativity, that critical thinking. So critical thinking came into play here because I see every competitor does the same type of video. I want to do something different. How can I do it differently? Creativity kicks in. Let's do a funny commercial instead. So it is important. And I think, but the thing is, how do you become creative? Some people are born with it. Some people are surrounded in a certain environment that makes them creative. It's not something that you have complete control over.
Yes.
Critical thinking, you can learn some methods. You can, read about the great philosophers of our time. But again, it's not something that you can teach yourself. So what do people do there?
So my gut is there will be 3 ways that people interface with the workforce. Call it plus minus 3 years from now. One will be they have to start their own company. They have to start their own entrepreneurial endeavor to make their money. 2 is they do one thing, they do it really, really well, but they're going to have to find 7, 8, 9 businesses to do it at because no one's going to employ them for even single or even dual skill set. So they're going to have to go fractional. Or the third is they're probably like 25 years old or younger, totally AI native and do 100 things leveraging AI. And then a company will employ you to be that person. And I would say that you've got to figure out which of those 3 are going to be. And in many ways, 1 and 2 are the same because starting your own business and starting your own fractional sort of portfolio thing, but that I think that's where it's going to boil down to.
One question that I get a lot when I go to a conference or I go to a school and talk to them about AI is it worth going to university? What do you think?
So for me, university was incredibly important. I have an undergrad in politics and a master's in international conflict studies. So neither of these
interesting.
Yes, but neither of these things ever come into use within my. But why was it so useful for me? because of the ADHD side, I was very fortunate that I found my course quite easy at undergrad, I suppose, as most people do.
Yeah.
So I was doing stuff on the side. I built an events company. I was doing tours from Nottingham to Amsterdam, doing tours from the Chinese campus up to Old Trafford, Manchester United, doing all these things on the side. So for me, it actually gave me time and space to start creating in a way that going into work wouldn't.
Yeah.
So for me, the things that university allowed me to do, and I would never have been a startup founder. I would have got a job. Now, obviously, things have changed, but I would have got a job. And only starting to build these things on the side whilst at university, because I was hungry to start doing stuff, led me to being a founder. So for me, it was so beneficial on that side. But don't go to university just to go to university.
Yeah.
Use it as time to figure out what you're doing and play around.
I remember once I had a tutor at university. I think we all kind of have a point of contact, right? And I got an email from him. I need to see you. Didn't say what it was. I was like, oh, interesting. Go to his office next day. He said, Danilo, I'm getting reports here that you've only been to 38% of your lectures this year, and you've bought only 2 of the books, 2 out of like the 30 books, 20 books. What's going on? Like, are you not enjoying it? Or I went to Bath Uni. It was a nice uni. And I just said to him, look, I'm sorry, but it's just, I'm a bit bored. I'm learning stuff that, okay, great. It's interesting, but like I had a bazillion ventures, a bazillion interests outside of what I was actually studying. And I chose business management. So it's like, it's the kind of thing you pick when you don't know what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. I think it's a great time for you to explore. If you don't go to university, the risk is that you end up doing some crappy job here and there. That takes up a lot of your time. The 40-hour week goes.
Yeah.
And then you're just too tired to do anything else. And you very quickly fall into this situation where you just accept life is a 9-to-5 situation, and that you take a holiday once a year, go get a mortgage when you're 20 something years old. So, but the problem is the high price you pay to be able to go to that experience, right? It's 40-50 grand debt afterwards. Yeah. Would you recommend people do go to university, where they go to another country where it's cheaper?
I'm so lucky. I was the last year which had the old fees, or the second last year which had the old fee structure. So it was very, very different. Yeah. And, for me,
just to remind people, it used to be 3.5 grand to go to uni, not 10, 12, 15 plus grand like it is today.
A year,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So very, very different. So super fortunate on that side. Probably would have been a bigger consideration for me. Yeah. But I still think, and to your point, that critical path divergence that you might have of accidentally ending up on the hamster wheel, which you still could at uni. You still could graduate uni, do the grad scheme, end up in management consultancy. Like, it can happen. So I'm not going to say one is a silver bullet, but if you use your time wisely, I'd say the chances of you breaking off the matrix is going to be higher. Yeah.
What are your views on people being employees and starting their own company? Should everybody start their own company?
I wish that I had worked for another company at some point, because although I obviously am obsessed and love being a founder, at this stage now with a Connected, for example, where we're at this level and the challenges, I have not seen anyone do it before. So I've got my team around me who have been in massive companies and done amazing things, and thank God for that. Yeah. But I'm like, I've not seen it before. I haven't seen that. So I think there's huge things to be said. Some of the best entrepreneurs I know, and I used to think it was the opposite when I was younger. I was like, nah, if you're a real entrepreneur, you'll never get a job. Yeah. Some of the best entrepreneurs I know spent 10 years in a corporate, understanding how big companies do it, or span out of a bigger startup. So everyone goes on their separate path, but I think the need to be entrepreneurialism, as we said before, on that backdrop of AI, is higher than ever.
Yeah, now it's a little bit easier to start a company. Would you say that there are some people who should never start a company?
Yes, accountants. No, I'm joking. I think everyone is more than capable. That's the first thing. If you want to do it, it can be done and will be done. But I do think if you're in it for a lifestyle where the fifth thing you say when you introduce yourself at that party is what you do for work, if that's what you want, don't start a company, because it will consume you. And it's fun, but it will consume.
I mean, one thought that I had on this was, if you're a person that vacillates a lot, you take days, sometimes weeks to make decisions. I think that becoming having your own company, becoming a startup founder is probably not for you. And there are people that can kind of, be muscled out of that situation, right? They're forced to make decisions quickly. But for certain people, that can create enormous amounts of stress, because some people don't like to do that. It's just the way they're wired. So, I mean, even if you're someone that, can't make decisions quickly, do you think you should still start a company? Is there an advantage
It's going to be harder.
Is it going to be harder, you think?
It's going to be harder. But I also think it's a good idea to differentiate between startup founder trying to be venture backed and starting your own company.
Yeah.
There's probably much more peaceful and easier ways of making money than doing the startup founder thing, right?
So let's talk about this, because I have been in the private equity backdrop where there was a really aggressive transformation. Took the company from 900 million to 4.9 billion in 1 year.
In a year.
4 years. No, give me a break. I mean, 1 year.
I was like, that's the best.
4 years.
Okay.
4 years. But it was a
insane.
15-year-old company.
That's insane.
So a lot of it was already 2,000 employees.
Wow.
So that was. I mean, I was doing also 90-hour weeks, like easy, 100 plus. And the constant frustration of every week going back or every month going back. Sometimes it was weekly to give updates, and the PE groups just saying not good enough, keep going. I was expecting double. That's good, but why don't you double it? What's stopping? Why can't you scale it faster? And it's just like constant push of just never being good enough. It's like being that bad dad, right? which never hugs or says they love you to their son. What's your advice for people who are thinking of getting investment for their business from a VC or from a PE? What happens when you do that?
By the way, I love the analogy of PE as a bad father. I think it's really good. It's really good.
Never says I love you.
Yeah, exactly.
Until you exit.
Yes. Once you take on institutional investment money, it's no longer your company, right? It's our company. It's a partnership. It's the same way as taking on a co-founder. Like, you've got to really know that you want to do it. And I think depending on where you are in life and your circumstances, also should impact whether you take that startup funding or not. PE and VC are different in that way. I think PE is a much safer. And if you look at the survival rates and the types of return profiles they're going for, obviously, that's a much safer bet. But if you're going for venture funding, it's easier if you don't have much to lose. If you've got the young family, all those things, I think all those things do count against you being able to be on that boom or bust journey. And you've got to know it is what it is. It's either going to work and be awesome, or you're going to leave with nothing. Yeah. And as long as you're cognizant of that, and as long as you're transparent with your employees and your early investors, if you've taken them, with what that boom or bust really is, then go for it. Go for it. But just see it for the journey that it will be, the roller coaster we're in. Once you're on, there's only two ways of getting off. Really well or really badly. Yeah. But I think if you can do it, because you're going to learn a hell of a lot.
Yeah. Do you believe there are some investors like P's or VCs they can get in the way? And like, what kind of things have you seen which gets in the way? Like, it really does not help the company they've invested in.
I think where investors create circumstances which hold back speed of execution, those are really bad things. Those are really
so things like, just really frequent updates that you need to prepare for every week and make reports for and that kind of stuff.
If you've got good processes, that part shouldn't be difficult. It's more when you have reserved matters or investor consent around executional items within the business. I can't hire people beyond this salary level, or if we're going to... So one of the standard clauses in the UK, and you know what the UK is like with weird and wonderful things, a very, very standard clause is you're not allowed to make decisions out of the ordinary running of business without investor consent. What the hell is ordinary in a startup? What is our ordinary business? Every day is something extraordinary going on in business. So there are things like that where is the institutional partner that you have, what's their interpretation of ordinary? Yeah. And it's those things which are going to come down to like the running of the business that can kill businesses.
The way I see this type of setup when you have a PE or VC invest in you is it's really a marriage. Like you've got to talk about hard things, you've got to confront things head on, it can get very messy. It can get very confrontational. It can be very happy. It is like a marriage. Do you see it this way as well?
I think so. I've not been married,
Yeah.
but it's like a co-founder relationship.
Yeah.
That's what I have seen with my investors, and I've been blessed with some great investors. So my lead investor at Real Sport, a guy called Nigel Ray, he was the owner of Saracens Rugby Club. He was lead investor into Vice Media, Domino's Pizza, Nutmeg, the private bank. Like, amazing guy to learn from, and he's my lead investor and connected as well. So that being an 11-year marriage, between founder and lead investor. So certainly it's got to be supportive. You've got to have that respect. You've got to have that trust, which is built over time. And I think that's one of the places where founders fall down as well, is when they're at a point where they can execute on a big funding round. Often they're in such a rush to do it, they forget to really date the person on the other side of the table before jumping in too quick. And that normally works the favor of the investor. Because the investor, that's their day job. They know exactly what they're doing. And it can be as rosy and rose-tinted goggles, glasses, whatever. For you as a founder, it's not for the investor. They're pros. They know what they're doing. So I think you can jump in too quickly as well.
Yeah, and the risk of that is it's messy to get out of, right? If you jump in too quickly, you realize that you don't line on the same type of morals, the same type of approach to work. It can get very interesting. Have you seen situations like this, or ever been in one like this?
I've been fortunate to not be in one personally like that, but I know businesses that when contracts and papers were not created properly, it was the death of the business. It's normally to do with levers provisions, where you see a lot of trouble there. Founders not understanding levers provisions properly, or founders not baking it in between themselves well enough. So using debt equity in a company, it's normally to do with sort of lever situations. When things are going well, it's a bit easier. So I'd say that's a main headache. And then you never know, especially with angel investors. This is the thing: VCs get a bad name, but at least they, for the most part, have a brand to uphold. Their employees in a company. You have angel investors. You have devil investors. Right, when they are just solo individual on a mission, they don't need to answer to anyone. And you can see sometimes they've put in these really predatory clauses. A founder who doesn't know what they're dealing with, and you can't get them off the cap table, and it can kill companies. Or you're trying to get papers signed, they won't do it. So be really wary of angel investors. They can often come up with weird and wonderful ways of doing things.
Here's a question that might put you in a weird spot. I was fortunate enough to have an interaction with Elon Musk recently.
Wow.
And I started to also learn a little bit more about the people that work with him. And this question is really, let's see what you think. Would you rather invest in a company that has a genius, ruthless founder, or in one which, he's a nice guy?
I would rather invest in a nice guy. But it's a big but, right? It's a big but. Listen, angel investments. Are we talking about angel investments?
Yeah, angel, or you can take it where you want.
Because angel investments, you should pretty much write off. So I think it's easy. Like if you've been a smart investor across diversified sources, and for me, my angel, I've got 25 angel investments, I would say 15 are write-offs. 2 have done really well. One called Laps, which is a B2C app, raised 30 million led by Greylock last year. One's called Carmen, French fintech company doing revenue-based financing, doing awesome. Nice. So you have 10% of your portfolio which are going to be winners. Write everything else off. So when it comes to angel investment, I always want to support people who I want to support. But if I'm playing big, probably you're going to go for the ruthless businessman. Probably you are. To make a good return on investment. Yeah. Interesting. But I think that's how you've got to see angel investing. And it's also where I see angel investors get in trouble and founders get in trouble not understanding what an angel investment is. You've got to understand the asset class you're playing.
The thing as well that we need to remember is there is many ways to look at it, right? It is business after all, and everybody's competing. And to compete, sometimes being the best is not enough. You've got to make decisions faster, and you've got to make some decisions which are seen as ruthless. But I think as we get older, we're similar. I'm 39, you're 33, so similar-ish age. As we get older, we start thinking about legacy, how people remember us, and then things around, okay, well, maybe I could make $1 billion with that company, or maybe I can make 10 million with that one, or maybe less. But the 10 million, people remember me as a nice guy, associated with nice people who do good things for others, to help others. And the $1 billion one, I could be like Elon Musk is an interesting example. He's by far the richest man on earth now, especially after certain friends he's made. But do people talk fondly about him? No. There's almost nobody that will mention him in a fond way, like he's a great friend or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting paradigm to live in, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would want to be in his shoes.
No, I don't think many people would want to be in his shoes. And I think you have to be a psychopath to get there, because I just don't see how it would work otherwise. Yeah. But I also think there are so many in between, right? And, please God, you should get the opportunity to invest in Elon Musk at seed stage, right? That would be nice.
Yeah.
I think you can be still a really nice guy and a brutal businessman.
Yeah.
Because I think when it comes to business, as long as you're being open with your team from day one, that it's a team, not a family.
Yeah.
And I'm the first one on the chopping block.
Yeah.
If shit goes really bad, right? That's all on me.
Yeah.
So I think you can be really authentic and open and communicative and be a nice guy, because if you draw the lines, but the ones you worry about is being like, oh, it's a family, like, we'll never ever, no one's ever going to get fired. Like, no, then you're playing a game.
Don't hire those.
Yeah.
The other day I was in an interesting situation in one of the companies that I'm involved in, where one of our lead managers, brilliant, done a great job. He started to make an argument that, he wants to run the teams, but he doesn't want to do performance reviews. He doesn't want to have those conversations because he believes that it takes a spark away from the team. And he wants other people to do performance reviews. So the managerial, the kind of more difficult conversation type stuff. What's your advice on that? Because I couldn't solve it.
Must be nice.
Yeah.
Must be nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I'll just do the good ones.
Yeah.
You do the bad ones, right?
Yeah.
I say that tongue in cheek because I used to be that guy. And again, it never, ever works. And some of my biggest regrets are where I should have had difficult conversations and didn't. And again, time and time again, the universe will show me that I'm wrong to do that. So can't get away from it. And actually, you're a bad manager if you don't know how to have difficult conversations. And you're doing more harm than good.
Yeah.
You need to give feedback to allow people to grow, and they'll thank you for it and they'll respect you for it. And if you're in this business to make friends, you're in the wrong place.
That's what I basically said as well. I said, look, man, you've got to be able to have these conversations. If it takes a spark away, maybe you're hiring immature people, or you don't know how to deliver that message correctly, or it's a part of personal development, right? To have these conversations.
This is it. You're building the spark around the wrong things. If you're building a spark around pure vibes, then you can't risk it. But if the vibes come from a environment of excellence, then you can have those direct conversations without ruining the vibe.
True.
If it's just built on the vibe, then the things underpinning it aren't there.
I'm going to get you to talk to him, I think.
Nice.
So look, interesting background, difficult background. Do you still believe you have a chip on your shoulder? You have something to prove? Or have you come to a point where you have fulfillment and now it's just enjoying the ride and trying to make great things happen?
I want to learn as much as possible. I always said to myself that anything that I achieve pre-turning 40 is a bonus. Everything up until that point is just learning, because I know that that greatness will take a while to get to. But no, just about trying to be the best version of yourself. It can't be about competing with others. There's always going to be someone else.
It's funny because a lot of people set that age at 20, 25, maybe 30, but I haven't heard many people set that age at 40, where I'm just going to try my best at different things. I hope it goes well. It's just a learning. After 40, I'll take things really serious. Like I'm going to really try hard at, so that's a good piece of advice. It takes time to get to a point where you can do great things.
Yeah. And it's not to say I'm not taking it so seriously now, but it's more that the knowledge that I still know nothing.
Yeah.
I'm so hungry for that knowledge over the next 8-9 years so that I can really, really, be at a stage. And I'm sure I feel the same before too. I'm sure I feel I'm still
We'll do this in 10 years. We'll be like,
Exactly.
the new age is 60. I'm learning until I'm 60.
Hey, if we're all going to live to 100, that bar's going to get higher,
Exactly, exactly. Listen, just to wrap up, for anybody who is coming from a difficult background, either because they haven't had the best cards dealt for them in terms of family they're in, or neurodivergent in some way, and they got to learn new things, what advice do you have for them?
Your biggest weakness will become your biggest strength, and your biggest strengths are also your biggest weakness. And it's really about your relationship with that wound that's going to see you through. It's like Achilles, right? With the heel, it's the strength and the weakness. It's two at the same time. Everything balances, right? So I would say it's all about your relationship to that difficulty, and whether it's going to give you good motivation, bad motivation, whether it's going to make you self-destructive, self-sabotage. It's all about your relationship to that difficulty. And if you can build a positive relationship with that difficulty, the world is your oyster.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. That was poetic. That was nice. Thank you so much, Roei. I really appreciate it.
You're a legend. Thanks, man.
Thanks.